Hi, my name is Raj, and I'm one of your LinguaSeekers Spanish teachers, and today we'll be learning about the present tense irregular conjugations. So let's do a review of the verbs first. The verbs in Spanish have roots and endings. The endings are one of three, AR, IR, or ER endings, whereas the roots are distinct for each verb. Hablar, which means to talk, has an AR ending, vivir, or to live, has an IR ending, and comer, or to eat, has an ER ending. And in Spanish verbs in the present tense that are not irregular, the root of the verb remains the same, while the ending of the verb is conjugated for each subject. And understanding the difference between the root and the ending is super important. So with hablar, ab is the root and ar is the ending. Vivir, viv is the root, ir is the ending. Comer, com is the root, and er is the ending. Now let's look at the traditional or regular AR, ER, and IR verb conjugations. With the AR verbs, o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. With the ER verbs, o, es, e, hemos, eis, and en. IR verbs, o, es, e, imos, is, and en. And now let's look at the irregular verbs. So the irregular verbs in the present tense don't follow a structured pattern like the normal conjugations for the AR, ER, and IR verbs. And that's what makes them irregular. So the best way at getting better at these irregular verb conjugations is just by practice and getting more exposure to them. And this is because the irregular verbs may be stem changing, may be irregular in all forms, and can be a lot of different types, which means that the only way we get better is again through practice. So now let's look at common stem changing or boot verbs, and we'll see why we call them boot verbs in a second. So let's look at the verb dormir. So dormir means to sleep, and this is a stem changing verb because the stem o goes to ue. So for example, in the yo form, dormir traditionally we would conjugate it by taking away the ending and adding an o. So we would say dormo. But now, because this is a stem changing verb, that O is going to become a UE, and we're going to say duermo, and we'll see that pattern. So yo duermo is I sleep, tú duermes, you sleep, él, ella, usted duerme, he, she, and you formal sleep. Dormimos is we sleep, dormís, you all informal sleep, and duermen, they masculine, they feminine, and you all formal sleep. And what you'll notice is that this stem changing application only comes through within this boot, in the yo form, the tú form, él, ella, usted, and ellos, ellas, ustedes. And the way we can remember this is by thinking of this boot shape that we see highlighted on the screen. Or we can just think of it by saying the nosotros and vosotros form always stay the same, and a stem changer will never apply to the nosotros and vosotros forms. So we see the same thing in the conjugation for jugar, which means to play. And this is a stem changing verb from you to ue. So instead of saying yo jugo, we say yo juego, which means I play. Tú juegas, you play. Él, ella, usted juega. He, she, you formal play. Nosotros jugamos, we play. Vosotros jugáis, you all informal play. And ellos, ellas, ustedes juegan. They masculine, they feminine, and you all formal play. Again, we see the stem change only apply in the boot that's highlighted on the screen, and the nosotros and vosotros forms remain the same. Now let's look at common irregular verbs in Spanish that are irregular in all forms. There is no boot verb anymore. So one of these verbs is ser, which means to be. So here, this is just a conjugation we need to memorize. There is no boot verb that can help us. Yo soy, I am. Tú eres, you, informal, are. Él, ella, usted, es. He, she, and you formal is or are. Nosotros somos, we are. Vosotros sois, you all informal are. And ellos, ellas, ustedes son. They masculine, they feminine, and you all formal are. Again, this conjugation for ser is something that we should get used to solely through practice because there is no other way we can learn this. Now we have the verb estar, which also means to be, and this may be a bit confusing at first, but the difference between the verbs ser and estar on a surface level is that even though both verbs mean to be, ser is a more permanent application, whereas estar is more temporary. And we'll do a whole video just covering ser versus estar in the future, but this is just something that I want to review. So yo estoy is I am. Tú estás, you informal are, notice the accent mark on the A. Él, ella, usted está. He, she, and you formal is or are. Nosotros estamos, we are. Vosotros estáis. you all informal are, and ellos, ellas, ustedes están. They masculine, they feminine, and you all formal are. Again, notice the accent marks. And in general, this is just a verb that we need to memorize because of the irregularity in all the different forms. Now, this is just a page dedicated to learning new verbs. The best way we get better at Spanish is simply by understanding more and learning more verbs so that we can speak better and write better. So here are some common Spanish verbs. This is just a page that you guys can look at, review, and possibly practice conjugations by. Now, this is some irregular verbs that we can practice. So based on the verbs we learned today, this lesson will allow you to conjugate some of these verbs, and others you can learn by yourself by learning it, different sound changing verbs and different irregular verbs that are completely irregular in all of their forms. We'll definitely do more practice on this, since this is an extremely fundamental concept to learning higher level Spanish. But for now, this is what we'll be learning, and thank you for listening.